put headphones on?
No.
Okay.
It wouldn't make sense for you.
Okay. Should I turn the car off?
I think so.
Can we get
Definitely
real cold
don't do
first?
that.
Because we're going to turn the car off.
All right, let's get real cold and real high.
Yeah. You going to light that?
Yeah.
Go for it. Where's the lighter? In your hair. Sick. If your mother only knew. If your mother only knew.
What's that?
If your mother only knew.
What are you singing?
That you would get with me.
I've never heard you sing this song.
If your mother only knew.
What's happening? Why are you doing this?
If your mother only knew.
Ben, stop.
Now. If your
Ben,
mother
what's
only
happening?
knew.
Stop.
Now. That you try to get with me.
Ugh. Like in my headphones too?
Yeah, that's why I thought it would sound cool in your headphones.
It was horrible. It was like very off-putting.
Well, I'm going to listen to it back and I bet it sounds tight.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to How Come. Thank you to Buffy. Ooh, we love Buffy.
Yeah.
For supporting How Come. For $20 off of your Buffy comforter, visit buffy.co and enter promo code How Come. We love it. It's so good. It's the best duvet I've ever had, and Ben won't let me put a cover on it, but that's fine. It's like a security blanket to us. We love it. Okay, so what the fuck is this song that you're singing? Ew. I don't even need to have the headphones on to know that it's disgusting.
Sounds tight.
It's grossing me out so much. Like if the goal was to never bang again, we've succeeded. Ew.
I don't know what you're talking about, man. That's some quality beatboxing.
Ew. You're like spitting everywhere.
It's not. I'm not.
It's like some R&B song I've never heard before that is just 3 words over and over again. I hate it.
Okay, I'm going to try one more time. Okay, ready? Wait.
I hate it. Ew. Ew. Ugh. Ew. 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 I'm literally crawling out of my skin. Who sings this? This is disgusting. Rozelle? Who is Rozelle? He was very popular 8 years ago, apparently. I saw him open up for the Wu-Tang Clan in 2003, and it blew my mind. It was one of my best. I disagree.
He beatboxes and sings at the same time. Listen.
Great. Maybe he could do it less sensually. I don't know. I feel like really weird as a sex podcaster just being disgusted by this. Ugh! Ugh. I don't even know if we can use this legally.
The beat and the chorus.
Same time.
I Ben,
But let me switch it up a little bit. We're going to do the beat, right?
I don't want to listen to this anymore.
The verse and the background vocals.
All right. We don't have to listen to Rozelle. I'm better anyway.
I'm just like in such a mood.
That's like the coolest thing like ever.
Can we turn the air off blasting at least? Cool. Okay. All right.
All right. I didn't know my singing and beatboxing would put you in such a mood.
I feel like if I asked like, please stop, like
I
5 times.
I understand, but you weren't
Understanding Rozelle. I still didn't like it. I didn't like it when you did it. I didn't like when Rozelle did it.
I mean, how did you not like it when I did it though? I'm the greatest. That was so good.
Ugh.
I put the headphones on. It sounded dope.
It
sounded dope. And yeah,
that's why we performers need audiences.
Nah, didn't you hear how I was
I mean, you guys, write in. Did you love
it?
Did you get horny to it?
No, it's not supposed to be horny. It's supposed to be impressive that
okay,
well,
both of you and Rozelle, both sounded like you were like predatory.
Don't bring Rozelle into this. We don't have to talk about Rozelle.
Both of you sounded predatory.
Rozelle's a great beatboxer.
If your mother only... It's disgusting. Your mother? Why are you thinking about somebody's mother when you're fucking them? Unless they're a child. I hate it. I hate it. I'm disgusted. All right, what else is in the news?
No, it's like if your mother
Shut
only,
up.
like,
I don't
you
care.
know, like
what?
Yeah, like if your mom only
She'd be
knew.
disappointed because I shouldn't be doing this because you're a child?
No, it's like if if your mom only knew what we do, she'd be grossed out. Like me and you. Like if your mom knew what me and you do,
I
she'd
disagree.
be grossed
I
out.
think my mom would be proud because my mom is a sexually woke woman.
Okay.
I hate this entire universe that you and Rozelle live in. I despise. All right.
Whatever. I'm a great beatboxer.
Shut up, Ben. You are a great beatboxer.
Thank you.
You're a great beatboxer.
Thank
I'm
you.
sorry for saying yes. We shouldn't say that.
It's really hot in this
It's
car
really
now.
hot in this
now that the air's off.
I know. You guys, what do you want? You want us to be hot and talking about it, or do you want the sound quality to be a little worse and the air conditioner on?
I think we should just fight through the heat. We can do it.
All right, we can do it. All right, so yeah, it's going to be a pretty short intro anyway, because the episode that we have is very, very, very good. I will warn you, trigger warning, it is super triggering. There is a lot of talk of child abuse and just sexual abuse, and I cried during it. Charlotte cried while doing the research. You probably will cry. If you're not in a good mental place, maybe save the second half of the episode for when you are, because it's just life is hard right now. Like, we don't need to pile on, but like, anyway, it's an important episode and we wanted to put it out, and Charlotte's on it, and like, don't you miss her? I miss her so much.
Charlene.
We love Charlene. We just did a nice little FaceTime with her. So yeah, any of you guys who are super easily triggered or in a bad place right now, after the theme song, just like, don't listen to the episode. But the first part should be okay. I think we'll talk about some...
Yeah, what do you want to talk about?
Oh, Rick and Morty. Okay.
What about it?
Okay, well, you know how I started this podcast on April 1st this year?
Right.
And I tried to do like a Rick and Morty launch.
Right, when they launched, yeah.
Like, remember
Season
that
2.
very special day?
In Atlantic City.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah,
With our
we were
friend
like-
Alex.
and
Yes,
we-
it was wonderful.
It was wonderful, and we found out, and we were
Yeah,
like, oh my
it was great.
God, like, it seems like it's a hoax, but then I went on Twitter, and they were like, it's not a hoax, and then
Yeah.
we got to listen to it, and it was so fun. So right now, Rick and Morty is kind of influenced me to like go back to like how come basics for this episode, because I wish they would go back to basics, because this season they basically did what I did episode 1 of this season, being like, you know, we're just going to go off the rails, and like sometimes we're not going to teach you about sex, and sometimes we're not going to talk about anything like related, and like blah, like, right? That's basically what they did at the beginning of this season. They were like, there's a lot of pressure on us to stay within the storyline and to continue like building this universe, and we kind of just like want to have fun with it.
Right.
Yeah.
But what about Rick and Morty?
I'm explaining that to you. I just explained the whole thing to you.
I know, but that's the whole thing. I thought you were going to say something about Rick and Morty.
Yeah, it's like the way that I feel about this podcast.
Oh, I thought you were going to tell me something about this, like something about Rick and Morty, like that I didn't know. Anyway, I get that.
Do you get that though about this podcast and why it correlates?
I get why it correlates, but I thought that was just a correlation, and you were bringing up something else about Rick and Morty.
I mean,
And
I
I got all.
you know who loves Rick and Morty?
Who?
Madison Beer.
Have you only just found out about Madison Beer?
I just found out about Madison Beer.
Oh man, she's the best. Nothing like
so hot.
a hottie with some talent too. She's
okay,
very talented.
Here's
She's
the thing: is I didn't even know she was a singer until she was on RuPaul's Drag Race.
Yeah.
But I know her from TikTok because like I'm just like obsessed with TikTok now, and like there's so many really very hot people on there, and Madison Beer is one of them.
Yeah, I think she like opens for Ariana Grande and like all that shit. She's like in the fold. She's going to explode once she has a hit.
Yeah.
Or once she features somebody on an album that's super pop. I think she actually has had some very popular features on her album, but I don't know.
She said recently that she has a song coming out that has a sample from Rick and Morty, like a sentence from.
Oh, that'd be sweet.
Yeah.
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 I know she loves.
Beer.
Madison Beer. she loves Bo Burnham.
Does she?
Yeah, she's like in love with Bo Burnham.
She's just like really hot and has a great sense of humor.
She's got great taste.
I thought you were going to say great tits, and I'm like, yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got great taste.
If you don't know Madison Beer, keep an eye out because she's going to be one of those big pop stars, I think.
So then I posted about how much I love Madison Beer and how excited I am that she's Jewish.
Yeah, I didn't know she was
I
Jewish.
didn't know she was Jewish. And then my friend Poutine Levine, who's a drag queen, wrote me, and she's also a Jewish drag queen. And she was like, Madison Beer sucks. And when she was on Drag Race, she was like really rude. And like the Drag Race fan base is like mad that she's coming back as a judge. As a judge next season on All Stars.
I didn't even know that she was on Drag Race. I haven't seen that episode. What season was it?
It's Secret Celebrity Drag Race. It's like what
When's that?
You know how
with like
Jermaine
Jermaine did it.
Yeah.
And like, yeah. Oh, she was on one of those episodes.
Yeah. And apparently she like complained about her makeup and like just wanted to be pretty instead of like doing full drag. But
interesting.
So look out for Madison Beer.
Check. Yeah, Madison Beer.
No, and then some other really hot girls are in the news.
Right.
This week, the Call Her Daddy girls.
I don't know. Okay, I only just learned about the Call Her Daddy because I don't listen to podcasts except How Come.
Oh,
and
you don't listen to How Come unless I make you and I'm like, hey.
I'm on it. So as far as podcasts go, I've listened to your podcast the most out of any podcast for sure. And then the only time that I also listen to podcasts is if I'm on them as a guest, I'll listen. And usually, like, if I'm opening or, like, working with a comedian that has a podcast, I'll, like, listen to their podcast.
Some of their episodes.
To, like, kind of...
Feel them out.
Yeah, feel them out, exactly. So, so I had no idea about these Call Her Daddy ladies. I had but I don't know. We kind of dug into it. We went down the rabbit hole.
About it right now. And so, like, I've been aware of Call Her Daddy.
Give me some of that water. It's too hot in here.
I know.
Oh, God. Clean, cool water from the weed store.
It's so nice. They give us for free water per person. Beautiful water sound. Anyway,
there's some ASMR for you motherfuckers.
So yeah, I knew about Call Her Daddy because like I always check how we're doing on the podcast charts, and suddenly one day there were these two girls at the top of the chart under Joe Rogan. Call Her Daddy, number 2 comedy charts. 2 very attractive girls working for Barstool Sports. I'm like familiar with Barstool Sports. I don't really work with them. They're like a little more bro culture-y than I'm accustomed to. Mm-hmm. But it's like, okay, so there's another sex podcast out there. 2 girls. Great. We love girls talking about sex. Right. That's awesome. So they're in the news because apparently they're breaking up because of a contract dispute. One of them...
Yeah, you want to?
Go ahead into like what we know.
Okay, what I don't.
Okay, the first thing we know is we listened to their last episode, which was recorded by Dave Portnoy, who runs Barstool. He's like the head daddy, or whatever.
And we heard his story first. Essentially, I had actually
he recorded a full episode on their podcast being like, this is what's happening.
Right.
Which I don't know about Barstool, but like, I don't know if that's ever happened before. Like him
I don't know,
swoop
but
in.
it was, if you haven't listened to it, it was really, it was kind of weird because he was giving out numbers of salary and all sorts of like numbers on the deal and like things that should normally be like very
really
like
wrapped up. But
yeah,
apparently they were released by one of the girls' boyfriends first.
Yeah.
That's
okay.
what he
So
says.
here's
what we know.
Here's what we know. This guy did an episode. He said that the Call Her Daddy girls were under a 3-year contract with Barstool. They gave them a platform, built them up, and they're one of their biggest money makers. And they had a 3-year contract with Barstool. The ladies, for whatever reason,
but one of the girls had started the name. They had recorded 4 episodes together.
right?
And then he reached out and was like, hey, we'll take you on as long as you give us the IP, like, which means like intellectual property of Call Her Daddy, the name of it, anything that comes up, all of the owner of the episodes and stuff. And she was like, yeah. And this girl, Sophia, is my partner. She's been doing it for the last 4 episodes. He's like, cool. You guys are going to get $75,000 a year and you're going to get bonuses with listenership.
Yeah, for all sorts of stuff. Anyway, so they had a 3-year contract. And apparently they didn't like the contract or they wanted out of their contract. So behind Barstool's back, the girls were shopping the show. They were trying to leave.
He says that it wasn't really Alex. It was Sophia had started dating a guy at HBO who was like, you guys are being like massively underpaid.
Right. But essentially it was the two of them that were shopping it.
Yeah.
But it was with the help of this other guy that Sophia was dating, right?
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, so they're shopping behind Barstool's back. Barstool catches wind of it, tries to talk to them, and they lie and they say we're not shopping yada yada. And then basically it turns out that there is a deal with another podcasting company, Wondery, that is in the works, headed up by this guy that's Sophia's boyfriend. They call him Suit Man. I can't remember his real name. Anyway, so but
let me look at. I mean, it doesn't even matter.
It doesn't matter.
Like
anyway,
none of the. We didn't know about it. I wasn't gonna look into. I had seen other podcasts talking about it, and like especially
I hate
other.
That we're talking.
I know.
About
I
it.
hate
It's
that
so
we're talking
annoying.
about it, but a lot of female sex podcasters talking about it and stuff.
Yeah.
I'm like, why do we care about this? And then I went to check the charts just to see how I'm doing. How do people like old Rem this week?
Yeah.
And Call Her Daddy was above Joe Rogan for the first time, and I was
Yeah.
like, what the fuck is happening?
Yeah.
And that's when I asked you, I said, have you heard about this drama? And then we decided to listen to this episode.
Right. And so they end up drafting a deal with Wondery, and Barstool finds out and says, well, you're under contract with us and and there's this big lawsuit that's about to happen, but
we want to keep you.
Yeah, but Barstool says, but we want to keep you.
And we like you.
And he goes, no, we don't even like you. He goes, I know that you're shady fuckers. I know that you guys are shady fuckers, but you only have 12 months left of your contract. And after the 12 months, you can keep the IP.
Take the IP.
You can, and we will sign you for $500,000 each for this year to finish out the year of the contract. You get to keep the IP. You got to keep all the merch. And the only thing that
Then they start mentioning. Then we'll take the alcohol and the merch and the alcohol. And now I know that Call Her Daddy has merch and alcohol, which I've never known before. I never knew about these. And now I'm like, but what about the alcohol?
Yeah.
Like I don't fucking care.
Yeah, exactly. So there's this big problem, and then so one of the girls, Alex, the original girl that started the podcast, who
came up with the name, does all the editing,
does all the stuff, who's essentially like the bigger star of the two. She says, holy shit, this deal with Barstool is too good to pass up.
Like, what are we doing?
What are we doing? This is exactly what we wanted. We
Yeah.
wanted this kind of money. We wanted the IP. We wanted all this stuff. We have the deal that we were looking for, and we get to stay where we are, and we get to leave after 1 year. So Alex says, I want this deal. Let's take the deal. And Sophia says, we can't take the deal because my boyfriend, Suit Man, stuck his neck out to get us the deal with Wondery. So Sophia is locked in basically with this situation that she can't go back to Barstool.
Did Dave say that on his one?
Yeah.
See, because then I watched, Alex did a half hour on YouTube that was like raw / uncut, except for I noticed several edits.
Nice.
And it was like her whole thing with the timeline. And like, before we get into like more of the thick of it, I basically would just not like to put on record, but like to offer the idea of, do you think this could be a hoax?
Like, okay, so we talked. The first thing that I said actually when I listened to this is, watch. You find out that Wondery is owned by Barstool.
Right.
Right. And I go.
Because
And
now
I go,
I didn't know about Wondery either. I didn't know about the merch.
And it's one of those things where it's like,
the alcohol.
now they're in all of the newspapers for like a scandal, which is all good. It's all pressed. It's all pressed for Wondery. It's all pressed for Barstool. It's all pressed for Caller Daddy.
Portnoy has said, he's like, I'm messy. I talk about stuff.
Yeah.
You know me.
Yeah.
I'm open. Oh, he starts his episode too being like, I am so honest. I am honest to a fault.
Right.
And Ben and I both look at each other and we go, only liars say that.
Right. Yeah. And
Like-
so I think that it's just, it could just be a big publicity stunt.
I think
the whole
so.
thing. Yeah.
So I'm like, also, I'm like a Holocaust Jew. I'm like really paranoid and shit. Like I'm the ones that like trickle down. That's like, we got to get out of here,
Yeah.
you know? But like, I also remember, and I don't know if any of my listeners ever watched this or are my same age. Do you remember Lonely Girl 15? I showed this to you
showed
yesterday.
it to me, and then I can see where the parallels
Where
could
the
be
parallel.
drawn.
Yeah. So Lonely Girl 15 was a YouTube channel. It was like one of the first YouTube vloggers. And she was this adorable girl with these like little edited videos of her and her friend Daniel. And like she was just like talk every day and like do weird stuff in her room and like dance. And it was edited like so cute before like everybody knew how to edit on TikTok. Like, and I used to watch her and I was like, she's fun. Like she's like aspirational and stuff. And then Daniel started doing a channel so you could like watch his life and stuff. And like you got really involved. And then it came out that the whole thing was a scripted television show.
Right, because they went missing in the thing. So they were doing
and
all
the whole
these,
scripted
yeah.
thing was that her family was like part of a cult, and they like left you these little breadcrumbs like along the way, but you never really got it until they went
there
missing.
There was going to be a movie that came out like later after they'd gone missing, and it was going to be kind of like some Blair Witch type shit where you're like, is this real type of thing?
Yeah.
But and it was just it ended up screwing up their whole deal, but I could see where they were going with, like, it's all just publicity.
I look in with a skeptical eye, and also the way Dave was talking about Sophia, he was very careful to make sure the girls, they come out of this looking a little more business savvy, because apparently they were getting a really raw deal compared to the other male podcasters at Barstool. And like Alex says that on her thing, that she was like, yeah, like I would hear rumblings of like the hockey part being like, oh, those girls are getting fucked.
Right.
You
and
know?
I mean, if that was the contract should have been negotiable after their popularity got so fucking huge. Because for $75,000 salary is
but they weren't. That's the thing is, okay, the numbers that they say is they would have both been getting $500K for a year, which is like, okay, you just got skyrocketed to stardom.
Yeah.
I would take that deal.
Right.
Like, I don't know what the alcohol and the merch is making.
I mean, it must be making a lot, because that's why Barstool is so upset.
So upset about
because
it.
they're losing so much money on merch and alcohol or
and
something
ads
like that.
and
ads
shit.
and all sorts of shit.
Yeah.
So it could.
But wait, let me finish this
Okay.
one point about
Go.
how they're speaking about Sophia and the girls. It's like they kind of still, Sophia seems like she doesn't have the blame because of this suit man. Like he's the scapegoat.
Right.
And the way Dave was saying it was, he was like, so maybe Sophia will come back and she'll have her own podcast.
On Barstool, yeah.
And maybe Alex will have her own podcast. And so Alex comes out with this thing. She's launching on Wednesday. It's this whole thing. It's like she ends her like epic 30-minute quote unquote uncut thing being like, so basically like it's just really sad that a guy came between our friendship, and then it's like feminism, woman power, bow, 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 you know? And it's like all of the blame is suit man.
Right. So that.
And then she's like, see you guys on fucking Wednesday. And that is the best promo.
Right. Yeah, and it's. I think if it is a business plan, or if this is a strategy, it's one of the the most brilliant strategies I've ever fucking seen.
I do believe. Here's what I think. I do believe there was a fight. I believe they reconciled it, and I think Dave was like, "Let's spin this.
Yeah,
let's make it huge."
And because that was the thing that I also find suspicious is the Dave being so, can't think of the word, candid. Candid's not the word.
Candid.
Yeah, but Dave was in that interview that he did.
Seemingly candid.
Yeah, Dave was seemingly spilling all sorts of beans that you normally wouldn't spill.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And I just think this is another level of like reality TV that like, you know how in like the Bravo reunions, like we see them walk off and take their mic packs off now? Yeah. You would never see that season 1.
Right.
But now it's like the audience knows more. Let's break down the 4th wall. In Rick and Morty, here's where Rick and Morty, they're like, let's break down the 5th wall and sell merch. The entire first episode just ends in none of this has happened. This is all just to buy merch. And buy the Ghost Train. If you guys don't watch Rick and Morty, please watch it.
Yeah.
It's Story Train. Sorry. What did I call it?
Ghost Train.
Ghost Train.
But like that was in Rick and Morty also. There was a guy that summoned Ghost Trains.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Was that's on the heist episode?
No, that's earlier season when they're doing Vindicators.
Nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's like the
I knew it was
Avengers.
like some team.
It's like,
you son of a bitch.
Yeah, you son of a bitch. I'm in.
You guys, watch Rick and Morty. It's so great. This podcast is not affiliated with it in any way.
I was going to say one more thing about Call Her Daddy, the Call Her Daddy situation. So what it seems like to me is Call Her Daddy will probably continue. Right?
Oh, well, Alex is coming back solo.
Exactly.
She's probably going to cycle in new hosts.
And then here's what I also think is going to happen. I think Sophia's also going to have another podcast. And I think Alex is also going to have another podcast.
Yeah. And
then
I think
they're going to reunite on Call Her Daddy and have Call Her Daddy.
I'm calling it, Daddy.
And now they have not one hit on their hands that everybody is listening to.
They have
3 because of all the drama.
And the merch.
And the merch.
And the alcohol. And the merch.
I think it's all very interesting.
And now a bunch of you know about a podcast that you otherwise wouldn't have. Because can I just actually say my opinion on this podcast? I do love women talking about sex, but I'm just sorry. I think it's not a very women pro positive. It's like all about giving the Gluck Gluck 3000, which is like basically deep throating, and like that's how you get a guy. It's
they are not, in my opinion. I once again, I know nothing about these women.
We know nothing.
I know nothing.
I know nothing.
I know
that's
why I kind of hate that we're kind of feeding into the whole thing. It's terrible. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend listening to. From what I can hear, what I know about these women, I don't think it's a podcast that I would.
It's like, this is how you get a rich guy. Like, it's not really like make something of yourself.
Who knows?
But also, we really have
no idea.
We have I've tried 15 minutes, and it's just
who knows? We don't know these women at all. This is all speculation, and who knows? They could be lovely girls, and they do, they're business people, and a lot of people like them. Yeah, and
they're advocating for fucking. But I will say, what I know of their audience is it's mostly older men rather than young women. It's like guys listening to like get horny, and like it's like audio porn.
Right.
But also respect them as business people. I'm so happy any woman is out there talking about sex, especially
and trying to
hot
earn more
ones
money
and trying to get money.
Yeah. Good.
Do
all
it.
good.
Do
Fuck
it.
yeah.
All right, now.
This car is so hot.
This car is so hot, and I want you guys to hear an episode that is actually so fucking important. And like I said, if you're in a sensitive place, do not listen. You will cry. You will sob. I already sobbed.
Save it for later.
Because of the cover of the New York Times was just the names of people who had died from corona, and it is just.
It's heartbreaking.
There's so much sad stuff going on. I posted this on my story.
But it's important to see that stuff. Yeah, you know what I mean?
That are hungry. If you guys can donate to food banks, like that's important right now. Instead of like, you can watch the Call Her Daddy drama. Watch it. Also watch Lonely Girl 15. Okay, after like wipe your brain of Call Her Daddy after and just watch Lonely Girl 15. It is a fantastic YouTube series.
Yeah, she showed me it last night. It's kind of crazy.
Insane. But donate to food banks.
Totally.
If you are in a household where there's domestic abuse going on, you got to report it. Save yourselves. You deserve better. So this subject matter of this podcast is sex trafficking within the States and around the world. And Charlotte and I talked to Katie Ford, who heads up the Freedom for All charity, which prevents sex trafficking. And it's a very important episode. Obviously, like, there's really serious stuff going on right now, but there's also still all the other shit that, you know, people
normally goes on.
Right. Like, people are still dying of cancer. We still need to, like, keep donating and thinking about these things that are actually happening.
Stay informed.
And trying to help out. But yeah, Charlotte and I were too sad to put this episode out last season. And now this season we're like, you know what? If the whole world is going to be focusing on stupid shit at this point, let's try to focus in on what's important.
Something important. Yep.
So you guys enjoy the episode. We love you. Oh, and I also just wanted to say I'm sorry about if anybody was watching our stories this week. Our team made a very insensitive error in posting a question box that said, do any of you have anal horror stories? I think what was meant to be posted was, do you have any funny anal snafus? Because we had talked about like Richard Gere and the gerbil and the butt stuff last episode. We shouldn't have phrased it that way. That obviously includes any sexual abuse or rape or, that a lot of people have gone through. Which some people responded to being like, wow, I didn't realize that so many other women had gone through this, and like how many of us kind of have been, I hate to say kind of, because I'm still kind of unlearning it, but like have been anally raped. A lot of you guys were like, please do a trigger warning next time, and we will, and we're really sorry. But this woman wrote to me, she said, hello, Remy, thanks for sharing all these testimonies. It's quite a shock about how many people have a story to tell about non-consensual anal penetration, either by force or by surprise. Like we always joke about, oh, they put it on the wrong hole. Like that's not consensual.
And that's not a thing either, by the way. Like, oh, he accidentally like missed, and like that's really like
those are guys knowing what they're doing.
Right.
She says it's quite triggering. I don't know about U.S. law, but in my country, as federal law describes rape as the insertion of an object, finger, or penis in a hole by constraint, threat, force, violence, or surprise. I myself have lived a first experience which was less than consensual. I understand you did too. Yup. And by reading your shares, a lot of us did. I think it's important to be able to put a word on it. It took me 7 years to process that it was actually rape and not just some guy putting a dick in the back without asking. I didn't know. I realized this whole thing is quite triggering. It was for me anyway. And reading all those testimonies of people's stories, I just hope that people realize that it's far from okay. It's criminal. What possesses men to just jam their dicks wherever the fuck they want? And I said, it's horrible. And she said, thanks so much. It means a lot that you set the record straight. Good for leaving successes up, because anal can indeed be, I left all the anal success stories up because I was like, come on. This is not like, we're not trying to like scare people off of anal, because like a lot of women have written in being like, I have my best orgasms.
Yeah, butt stuff can be fun.
We love anal.
Yeah, butt stuff.
Tell them how much you love licking my anal.
Oh man, boy do I.
She says, good for leaving the successes up, because anal can indeed be super fun, and I'm glad we can celebrate that. Hope you're doing good, and thanks for your wonderful podcast and platform. I love you guys. Yeah. Okay, so this episode, honestly, you'll probably enjoy listening to Charlotte because we love her. And I can't wait till she maybe gets like recording equipment or something so she can like say hello. Maybe we'll do a Patreon with her on Zoom that just has worse audio quality. But yeah, you guys enjoy the episode, and don't listen if you're gonna cry. Oh, we're driving now, but I should also say when you go to storytrain.com, it's not even available because Rick and Morty's not trying to sell merch. They don't care.
I don't know about all that because I'm pretty sure I read that they are building that site.
Oh, well, you know who's not available with merch right now? Us, because we can't get our shit together.
I'm working on it for you, babe.
Well, yeah, we're going to have some really good merch coming out soon, but it's not... listen, I'm a mess, and don't even listen to me sometimes.
No, that's not true.
Okay, but go... You know what you can do? Rate, review, subscribe. Post about us in your stories. Tell people. But yeah, we don't have merch at
I'm
the
actually
moment.
working on it for her, and I just have not shown her yet.
Okay.
So everybody, we love you.
Stay tuned.
Goodbye.
How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help, 'cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna jizz.
Before we get started, I just want to shout out Buffy one more time. Buffy, thank you so much for my Buffy Cloud Comforter. Buffy's debut product, the Cloud Comforter, is covered in super soft eucalyptus fabric and filled with fluffy fiber made from 100% recycled bottles. So we're like, saying that, issues still exist in the world, and recycling, it's a big one that we still need to do. And Buffy creates such sustainable products that not only are they comfy and snuggly, but they make you feel good, and they make the world feel better too. The inside filling of each comforter, like I said, is made of 100% recycled water bottles that are transformed and given a second life as a super fluffy fiber, which, like, remember when they started making sweaters out of water bottles and you were like, how? It doesn't matter how. That's amazing. The cloud even feels softer than down while keeping approximately 50 bottles out of landfills and oceans. The average down comforter harms 12 geese, but Buffy's comforter is cruelty-free. I love it. After only 1 year, Buffy has recycled and reused over 6 million water bottles. That is fantastic. So you can try a comforter in your own bed for free. If you don't love it, return it at no cost. We love our comforter. I wish Ben was he's cooking right now for the family, but if he could tell you our experience, like, we get so excited every night to, like, we call it snuggling in, because the comforter makes the bed, like, just so good for, like, human contact, but then also not sweating. It's also nice if you're alone. You can really cocoon up and get warm. It's like, it does everything. I'm obsessed with it. He's obsessed with it. And, like, if I have to say it again, he won't let me put a duvet on it because he's like, it's so soft. And I'm like, what if I get my period? He's like, I don't care. That part I don't love. But you guys, if you want your own Buffy comforter, get one. Treat yourself. They're not even expensive. It's awesome. So for $20 off your Buffy comforter, visit buffy.co and enter promo code HowCome. That is buffy.co, promo code HowCome for $20 off. You're going to love it. And the episode is interesting. I know I already said a trigger warning, but we're not just talking about trafficking. We're talking about modern day slavery. It's a very heavy episode, but we're also talking about Ford models because that's where Katie's parents, they created it. So she's going to talk to us about that. And it's back in time. It's right after my 30th birthday, and we're at Nanny's, and Nanny's still around, and Charlotte's there. And yeah, here we go. Our guest today is Katie Ford. She is the former CEO and chairman of Ford Models. In 2007, she sold Ford and now works to combat human trafficking as the founder and CEO of the nonprofit Freedom for All, which focuses on fighting sex trafficking, debt bondage, forced labor, and child labor. Thank you so much for being here. We are honored to have you in Nanny's house.
It's insane. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's very exciting. So you have done everything that has to do with helping women in difficult situations.
Well, I've done helping women in not difficult situations and building careers. That's what I did at Ford. Mm-hmm. And then later helping women who have been in forced labor, whether it's sexual forced labor or work situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Charlotte had done a great amount of research, obviously. Charlotte's here. Everybody say hi to Charlotte. And we were just saying that in the modeling industry, usually there's a lot of women at the mercy of not knowing what's going on. And Ford was really the first company to make women's
pay them fair wages, treat them fairly. I mean, and your parents did that.
When my parents started, actually, in 1946, so it was right after World War II, there were mostly men who were the heads of agencies.
Yeah.
And they didn't think that they had to pay the women a lot of the time. Not all the time, but a lot of the time. And they thought they were there for sexual favors. Mm-hmm. My parents thought it was natural to pay them and to protect them.
What a thought.
What a thought. I used to say it's pathetic that our differential in businesses that were honest.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
At least that was then.
That was then. Now
things in the industry changed over time, but that's what forced it to change.
Totally.
Was really that the models switched to Ford back in the 40s. Mm-hmm. So people who wanted to compete, they had to pay the models. I mean, it's such a natural.
Yeah. Why didn't people think they had to pay them?
Because people are abusive sometimes.
I mean, most people don't pay comics. I'm thinking about it. I'm like, where's the Ford of comedians coming out? But it's when free labor is available, people are going to take advantage of that, especially with young girls who are impressionable and just want to get into an industry.
But even when they were in the industry back then, this is back then, even if they were in the industry for a while, there weren't many choices to choose from. We're talking right after World War II. And I think they all did the same thing.
Yeah, and what I found really interesting, too, was that your house that you lived in was basically like a model boarding house.
So in the late 50s, early 60s, my parents started to bring models over from Europe. And they were frequently young. So they were 17, 18, till 22. And they would come and stay with us for a while. The ones who were younger usually came with parents, and that really was for a period when there were younger models, which wasn't a great thing in the industry.
How young is young?
15.
15, yeah.
And they'd come with their parents, and then they would be in an apartment with their parents.
I mean, I recently saw a documentary on Netflix like a few years ago. I should have brought it up to you before so I could find the name. But it was about models in Asian countries that are still getting treated really poorly, and they're getting shipped over from European countries, and there's no one to protect them. And they're essentially in more debt after the time that they're there, than getting successful or anything. And then they have nothing to do and no way to get back.
That is a common thing, not just in modeling. You hear it less in modeling because when you advance to model to bring them over, usually they earn it back in a day or two when they start working. So it isn't, if you're in New York and you're working, it's not a big deal.
Survive.
It's not a debt in the way that debt bondage is, where you aren't free to work around the world or leave, whereas people who are in other professions like domestic workers, I work with domestic workers now, sometimes they go and they are enslaved in certain places under the guise of a debt.
Yeah.
And the debt actually was never something they agreed to.
Right.
How does that? Sorry.
Yeah. How does that? What does
that mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So we rescued a woman who was being held in Kuwait. She reached over the Freedom for All info account, if you can believe it, and said, "I'm a 32-year-old female from Cameroon being held in modern day slavery. Please save me. There are many others in worse conditions who are being treated like animals." When she originally went to Kuwait, somebody had offered her a job actually teaching English. She thought she was going to teach English.
Right.
And this was somebody from her home country who lived in her neighborhood. But when they got to Kuwait, there was no job teaching English. She was in someone's household. And when she said, "I want to go home, I never agreed to this," they said, "Well, we paid $2,500 to bring you here.
Yeah.
And you can't just go. You have to pay that back." And she was supposed to be earning $800 a month. They said, "We're going to pay you $100 a month for 24 months. Get that? 24 months times $100, $2,400. But she owed $2,500 in theory.
Okay.
So the point is, it was a system to enslave people. And in some cases, it still exists.
And even if she were to make up that money, there's no real way to get out of it once they say no. What was the first time that you found out about modern day slavery?
I was asked to speak at a UN conference on modern day slavery, actually right after I had sold Ford. I got the invitation before, and they thought I was still the head of Ford. And I wrote them back and said, "Why would you want me? I've never even heard this term.
Yeah.
I like to know what I'm talking about." So anyway, I spoke with them and I agreed to go. But we were part of a group that were women who were in business, government, and the arts. And we were commenting more about what we heard than explaining the problem. There were people who worked in it already who were explaining the problem.
Yeah.
it was something I totally related to, because how people are trafficked across borders was very similar to what we said to models when we scouted around the world.
Yeah.
We said, this is what you can earn, and this is what we think you're going to do. And they came here, and that's what we tried to do. In the case of people who are trafficked, they're told whatever they're going to earn, they're told the job, but they're duped. They're not going to get that job, they're not going to earn that salary. And in many cases, they're not going to earn anything and are forced into brothels.
Right. Yeah, I was reading one of your stories that this woman had like a pretty great job lined up, and then they ended up just taking her passport and making her a prostitute and holding a gun to her head and saying that if she were to try and contact anybody, they would hurt her family. And she didn't get out for 15 years or something like that.
I'm not sure which one. Well, the woman
many.
from Cameroon
yeah.
was profiled on PBS that you were on.
Right.
But she found you.
She found me after a few months.
Yeah.
And, she was lucky to get out, and she dared leave the house. In the process, she had seen some newspapers in English where they were offering to pay $2,000 or $3,000 if you gave a kidney. She actually debated doing something like that to get out of that situation. And many people die that way. That is really crazy. The person who came to New York, whose story you might be telling, she came here. She had been a trader in
that's who it was.
Indonesia. She had a college education. She was in Indonesia. The economy collapsed. She lost her job. She paid a labor broker in Indonesia. 12 years ago, $3,000 American
what
dollars.
Me too, because everything seems like so above board and like the thing that you would do. You get a visa, you pay a labor broker, and then you arrive and your passport is taken and you're forced into prostitution.
It was unbelievable. Everything seemed legitimate, including when she arrived at Kennedy. They held up a sign with her name. She got in the car, went to the place where they were staying. They held a gun to her head, made her strip. And that was it for several years. And she escaped once. And a woman in the brothel had said, if you ever escape this person, we'll give you a job. So she kept that number. She called the number. She met the person. And it was another pimp.
Oh, my gosh.
I know. Then she later escaped, and she went to a police station. The first police station didn't believe her, and the second did not believe her.
Yeah.
This was 12 years ago. Remember, it was a while ago when trafficking wasn't discussed that much.
Yeah. I mean, even now, this year has been a whole year of believe women, even if they're saying something really crazy, like nobody's trying to benefit from saying I was sex trafficked. And they're trying to get free.
Right. So they didn't know what she wanted. I don't think they knew if she wanted money, whatever it was, because it never got that far along. She went to the park and sat on a bench. She was now homeless, and she was crying. And a man said to her, why are you crying? And now she knew not to say the real story. And she said, well, I have a friend who's in this situation, and I don't know what to do. And this man said, come back tomorrow. I'll bring help. And he brought back help.
How do you know who to trust, especially after this has happened to you?
Well, it's very hard for those women ever to trust again. Because you see over and over how you're being abused. The people who are supposed to help, like police, didn't help her. But in the end, she was helped. So she knows they're good people.
You have to keep
and
trying.
now she's, there are a lot of people who help her now, and she really helps other victims. And she's a shelter here in New York.
She spoke at your event a few years ago, right?
She did.
Yeah.
She spoke.
That was the first time
event.
I had ever heard about trafficking in modern day society, and it blew my mind. And a lot of the stats that were so crazy to me is that it's not just you go to Europe and that's where it happens, or you go to Asia or whatever. Like our dad, we joke about it, but he makes us watch Taken every time we go out of the country because he thinks that something's going to happen to us. But there's so much going on at home. This woman, it happened in New
York City. And there were 3 of them who told their story. One was in Washington, D.C. One was here and one was in New Jersey. Here is New York City.
I don't think people even realize that slavery is a thing anymore. They think it's in the past, let alone how widespread it is. Like some of the numbers that you've given blew my mind.
Well, today there are 40 million people in slavery. Just as we're sitting here, there are 40 million people. That is, I think, over 25 of the top American cities. So imagine all these cities being enslaved.
Yeah.
Who is that? Oh, okay. I was like, I don't know that ring. No, I'm like, I know Floor's ringtone. I know my ringtone. I know Nanny's ringtone. And I know the house phone. This is a much more business ringtone.
It is. It's official.
Yeah.
Moms would be like, where do you even find this?
I have a friend whose daughters put on a ringtone, Mom, pick up.
Hilarious.
Mom, pick up.
Pick up.
That's funny. No, you were saying, like, imagine the biggest cities in America, like New York, California, Austin.
Chicago. The 25 top cities in America, the largest. Imagine them all being enslaved.
Yeah.
That's what's wild. Happening at around the world. That many people are enslaved.
Yeah, and child slavery as well. You speak about it's not just prostitution and stuff. It's labor from a very young age, which is so sad. But you guys have freed 10,000 people at this point, which is pretty huge.
We've helped free over 10,000 people. And what you didn't mention is children are used both for labor and for sex.
So true.
The group that we work with in the Philippines was helping women, and then the age got younger and younger for sex trafficking, people who were being trafficked. And then it got to small children primarily because of cyber sex.
Oh, what?
Over the internet.
So what would they use them for?
You look confused.
Yeah.
It's how I think most of us react.
Yeah.
But it's really permission to torture people when they do it over the internet. It's not because they're there willingly doing it. So whatever.
So it's like webcam stuff?
It's a man usually for on one side of the computer. Imagine Skype. It's a webcam.
Yeah.
And they tell a man in that location, in this case in the Philippines, what to do to the young
child. Oh my God.
It is unbelievable.
And how are these things able to exist? Like it's clearly all dark web, but like, is there nobody trying to save these people besides you guys?
Oh, we are just a drop in the bucket. No, there are a lot of people who are trying to stop it, including governments that cooperate, and when they find it, try to stop it and shut it down. And also the payment services try to shut them down.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, if somebody's buying someone else's torture, essentially, that should be very illegal activity.
Right. And both the financial payment companies and governments try to stop it, but it still is growing.
Yeah. Well, I was reading up on it, and you mentioned the Polaris Project, which is the national hotline. I had never even heard of that before. Like, why is trafficking, do you think, such an under-talked about issue, I guess?
Well, I think trafficking actually has been talked about a lot more recently.
Yeah.
In the last 5 years, I find many more people know about it than knew about it 10 years ago. In the case of Polaris Project, the national hotline, it should really be publicized more. Mm-hmm. It's hard to get free advertising. You would think for something like that we could get billboards, but we've tried. It's very hard. And they had something briefly in Times Square. I think a lot of people don't want to think about it.
It's too upsetting.
Don't want to hear about it.
Yeah.
They think that prostitutes want to be there, and there are some who want to be there.
Right, definitely.
But people who work in the field have told me that is a smaller amount than the amount who are trafficked and kept in apartments and locked up.
Definitely. I mean, I think we talk to a lot of those people that go into, the adult industry, whether it's porn or they do sex work, and they love it and they're willing to do it. And that is a very admirable thing. And people do get confused thinking that everyone who's in those industries is trafficked. They're not, but there are a lot of people who are. And it's a huge and very painful thing to think about.
To be forced.
Of
course.
Yeah.
I mean, being forced that way, and imagine children being forced. How hard that would be. It's really hard to imagine. If I didn't meet the children all the time, it would be hard for me to keep it in my mind. Mm-hmm. The wonderful thing is that they can also recover.
Yeah. That's what you were saying as well, is that like it's crazy to see the resilience of these people.
They are truly amazing. Mm-hmm. And the group I work with in the Philippines, I've watched the children grow up, because obviously they can't go home when this has happened to them, because usually the parents were somehow involved.
Really?
Well, they certainly knew about it. How does it happen to a 5-year-old if the parent doesn't know?
Or if they never say, like, my kid was missing, then they were probably involved.
That's right. So.
Yeah.
How have you seen them, like some of these children, grow from these experiences?
Well, there's one girl I like to tell her story, because there were 3. They're cousins, and they were all trafficked at the same time. And when I met them the first time, one of them could speak, and the other 2 just looked down at the floor. The second year, another one could speak, and I thought when I left that time, maybe some don't recover. So the next year when I came back, I think it was actually a year and a half later, the one who had barely spoken for 2 years all of a sudden was lighting up the room, leading this group of 30 girls.
Yeah.
And it was a miracle. I immediately started crying. Even as I tell the story now, I have goosebumps, because it was such a miracle that her life force came back. And she is now, she's only 17 years old, but she is working in the Philippines, talking to other kids and trying to end trafficking and warning kids about what can happen.
And I think that part of the story is so important too, because even the second I find out that something has happened to somebody really young, or so even somebody my age, let's say, I'm like, okay, well, that's irreparable. Like, what do you do about that? But just hearing that people can bounce back, and that it won't destroy their lives, and that there is a reason why you would want to save them, because there's someone worth saving.
There are 40 million people who are worth saving.
Yeah.
It's definitely a good lesson for everyone too. Just seeing how resilient humans are. Like, you can go through so much horrible shit, and this being probably the worst thing a person can go through.
Yeah.
And bounce back.
Right. It is a miracle that we can be that resilient.
Yeah.
And, there are people also have been tortured in labor.
Yeah.
And I've watched them be free adults, and they might be 45 years old.
And free for the first time?
And free for the first time in their lives, even though they were working the whole time. Let's say working on a farm, as an example. And this happened to be in India, where someone is given $500 just to as a reparation. 5 years later, 2 years later, he had a shop where he was selling things. 5 years later, he had a new home and putting the shop in it.
Gosh.
And when I received the pictures, when it was really complete 7 years later, somebody went there and was taking pictures. They happened to shoot this house. I saw all these electrical switches. And I thought, this man lived in a shed with his family, an animal shed.
Yeah.
And just with a little help and being freed, help from the group that did it, he now has a home. His kids are all finishing school.
Wow.
Which normally they get enslaved with the fathers.
Yeah.
So it's really a huge change.
Well, that was interesting to me too, is that how many men are enslaved as well. I know that it's not great to think this way, but you think of women as easier controlled, but then when you think of how many men are in forced labor as well, it's really mind-blowing. How does that even happen?
Well, it's all systems of slavery. When it's an adult man, there are usually, first of all, adult men can be controlled with guns. But in this case, it's control. If you imagine slavery in the United States in the early 1800s, late 1700s, you're on a farm, you're isolated, your father was enslaved. They say he has a debt. He hasn't gone to school. You don't go to school, so you don't know if the debt's paid off. The children, especially the male children, are kept in slavery with the father. And then somebody needs medical help. They borrow it from the landlord, the $15. They then have a new debt. And they keep them like that for generations.
Do you think language is a big part of it too, like being
not being able to speak
country, where you don't speak the language?
Well, in this case, they're in their home country. They speak the language.
Yeah.
So in this case, it isn't. But not knowing a language is definitely another form of isolation, which contributes to your vulnerability to being trafficked.
But even if you do know the language, you can't read necessarily, or something, you haven't been educated, you don't have the resources to escape, like slavery in our country in the 1800s.
That's right. But then it was legal.
Yeah.
You have to remember it was, it was legal.
Yes. So those systems were okay by the government.
Right.
Yeah.
So in India, it's not okay with the government. But these people don't know it.
Yeah.
So they've never gone to school. They don't know about human rights.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. There's a huge thing in India just now that the forced marriage age has gotten older, thankfully. And a lot of women that you're rescuing are from forced marriages, because you can technically in India before this week marry someone who is below 18 and have sex with them, and that's not considered rape, because under the fact that you're married, it's a legal thing to do.
Right, and the parents forced it, I gather.
Yeah.
That's wild. And the countries, like you were saying, these are all very systemic things. Like, was it, like, North Korea has one of the highest rates, if not the highest, of slavery?
Well, North Korea, I've read a book and heard this amazing woman speak. She said the whole country, in effect, is trafficked because it is, everybody does what the government says to do.
Yeah.
However, their isolation
is not like nothing else.
Is unlike almost anywhere else on Earth.
They can't go on the internet.
Right. And if you fly over it, it's black because there isn't enough electricity. You see lights almost everywhere else, somewhere around there. But there, it's quite dark. And when they escape, they usually escape to China. So China had the one-child rule. They're in need of women. So they come across the border, the North Koreans, and they get trafficked.
And the one-child rule, just for anybody who's listening and isn't familiar, is they initially wanted only a male son. So sometimes the female children would be killed or left or something. And so now they're
sent abroad for adoption.
So now they're in a female deficit and they're looking for more women to come in.
They're also just highly overpopulated, which is why they limit it to one child.
Right.
But I read this statistic in The Guardian from last year saying that 1 in 10 of North Korea are enslaved, which is 2.6 million people.
That's wild.
I haven't heard that, so I didn't know what it was referring to.
Insane. Yeah. But I don't know. Do you want to? I want to talk about Ford a little more.
I do too,
if possible.
I do too. But I just want to. There was one more thing I had to say about trafficking. I mean, we always talk about, like, just going off of the resilience thing. We talk about bouncing back from like a relationship or a sexual trauma or something, and a lot of people who haven't been abused to this extent find it really difficult to move on mentally. How do you help these women and men get past that in like a sexual way to, like, you know, feel more in their bodies and more control of themselves again?
Well, the groups that I work with, most of them actually have many people who've been in the same situation. Mm-hmm. So they can talk about their experience.
Yeah.
And talk about what happened to them immediately afterwards and then later. Many people find it helpful to speak with others who have
definitely
had the same thing happen.
And then you don't feel like
because
you're
you're
weird.
not alone.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
You're not alone. You don't feel you're weird. I always
You're
thought
not the
it
only
might
person
be a
who
problem.
got duped into doing this.
Right.
Yeah.
And for the children, there are other children there who've gone through the same thing, whose parents have totally, well, they were terrible. Given them away for the worst thing
ever
that you could imagine.
Yeah. I can't imagine having that knowledge that you're like, oh, not only was I not wanted, I was sold or I was trafficked.
By my parents.
Yeah.
And those kids know it's wrong. There is an instinctive part of them that know there is something wrong, that those people were supposed to protect you. It's very interesting for me to see how much children instinctively are correct.
Yeah.
And sometimes one of the women will have a child from a person who raped her.
Right.
And gotta say, the girls in the shelter, most of them are younger than 18, but some are older. They treat that child like a brother and sister. You know, they are all so happy and warm. And I think that helps the mother a lot too.
Definitely. Yeah. It's just so, it makes me very sad. And
you know, if you saw it though, and you saw the change when people are freed and when they go through a program, it is so uplifting.
Yeah.
I have friends who didn't want to go to the shelter because they thought they would get...
It's too sad.
It's too sad. And now they want to see how the children have progressed because they left
can.
happy.
Yeah.
Yes, and because they can and do progress.
Yeah. And I mean, besides giving to organizations, what's a way that we can help? Like, because when you hear something like this, you just feel helpless, kind of. If they can't reach me, how do I reach them?
You know, it depends what people can do in order to help, because everybody does have a skill set. People can contribute time if they're psychologists or healthcare workers, or they can go to shelters sometimes and teach different crafts. Somebody in the Philippines who I met taught them how to defend themselves. It was a woman who just went and taught them some martial arts.
And talking about it, probably, like, just
like awareness,
making other people aware that this is a problem, and maybe to be on the lookout if you see somebody who looks like they're not in control of their life.
Well, you know, it's very hard to know if somebody is or is not in control. And when people are being controlled, the people who are controlling them usually have a way of watching.
Yeah.
So if there's somebody who's forced into prostitution and there's a car driver, the car driver may be watching so that woman doesn't escape to the place where she's taken.
Right. It's a system. It's a bunch of people. I mean, we talked about R. Kelly, and have you seen his documentary?
I heard your
Surviving R. Kelly documentary is all about how it's not just R. Kelly doing it. It's everybody in his team who's helping and acquiring these girls and going to middle schools and getting them back and staying quiet and the women who become a part of it. It's a system. And if you're part of one of those systems and you feel like you can't escape, like, please do. 'Cause even if you're not the one being enslaved, like, you're kind of being enslaved by being a part of that.
Those people really did sound like they were being enslaved.
Yeah.
I didn't see the documentary.
Yeah.
But I heard about it.
Yeah.
And so to me, it sounded like they were being enslaved. And I thought the mental aspect of how you keep control too was happening.
Absolutely. When you go to the bathroom, who you can speak to, when you can speak to them.
Yeah. And there was even, you were just mentioning how the driver's in on it. R. Kelly had two of the women who people in their family had said they're being enslaved. And then his reaction was to put them out in the world and show them just doing themselves and telling people, oh, we're out here just because we want to be. But in that moment, they're enslaved and they're keeping up the facade so that they won't get in more trouble when they get home.
I have to see that because that is just unbelievable.
What are the top things people can do, whether it's to prevent this from happening to themselves, like in Taken, or on the other side, to prevent it and spread awareness?
Well, in the case of people traveling abroad for work, of course, they should do a lot of
due diligence.
But it's really hard when I look online to see which look like an honest broker and which look like corrupt brokers. It is not clear at all that they're honest. And I've looked in other countries.
Yeah.
So another thing is, don't go home with somebody who's flattering you, a cute guy who's just, usually it's a guy, flattering you as a woman, because you don't know what's going to happen if you don't know this person. That is just a big risk, and you don't have friends who know that person.
Yeah. I thought what was interesting was you had given a piece of advice. Make sure that your family and friends know where you are and have control over your passport and your documents as well, just in case something does happen. It's easier to put out an alert. And
everybody should, when they travel abroad, should have a copy of their passport hidden somewhere, and their parents or family should have copies of their passport also.
Yeah.
Because when you don't have your passport,
you don't have your identity.
You don't have your identity. And in America, when I went to the embassy because I didn't have my passport, they asked me some questions and believed it. But when you're from some other countries where there aren't ways to identify you easily, and there are lots of governments that really don't have infrastructure like we do.
Yeah.
It's very hard for people to get their passports again.
Right.
They're not back in their home country. They don't have embassies in that country where they traveled to. And it's really difficult. The other thing you should have is a code word, like strawberry. And so
favorite fruit.
Yes, we decided the other day that is our favorite fruit. The best fruit. Confirmed.
If for some reason you're in a difficult situation and you're lucky enough to get to call your family, which is unusual, but in that off chance, have
a word that you
can
say
that you say that they know to start paying attention.
Yeah.
I really miss the strawberries at home.
Yeah.
If you think somebody is being trafficked, it's very hard. I remember seeing a child working in Aspen.
Well,
I started asking.
In Aspen?
Well, I started asking, is today school holiday?
Yeah.
And then I asked my friend to find out who that child was, just to see if it was the child of the owner. And it was the child of the owner who was just hanging out.
Then that's a different thing.
It was a day off.
Yeah.
But one of the women who you heard the night you came to the benefit had been trafficked to the United States at the age of 9. And she worked until she escaped when she was 17. She was taking care of children, cleaning the floor at this house. When she picked up the children from school, nobody asked her why she was working. Nobody asked why she wasn't in school.
Yeah.
Nobody asked on play dates.
Why is this young child bringing?
Why was she in the kitchen preparing things?
Oh my God.
And this was right outside of Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And when
in
it
a
happened,
wealthy building. I mean, a friend told me he used to go to play dates to that building.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh.
And the child in Aspen, did it turn out that he was...
His mother owned the restaurant.
His mother owned. Okay. Yeah. But it's good to ask. You can always ask.
You need to ask, because if you have a hunch, you can report it to the hotline. For adults who you think might be forced in prostitution, it's harder. You can call the hotline, but if the person who is in that situation hasn't indicated that they are in trouble, it's much harder to get them. They can try, but it's much harder.
Definitely. And the hotline again is
Polaris Project, 888-3737-888.
Okay, so keep it. We'll have that below in the link.
Yeah, you'll have to keep that.
Yeah, no, we'll put it below in the link.
One of the ways people get help is when television runs it on the bottom line, because women who are enslaved are frequently in hotels. That's the one time they're separated from their Johns, or from the pimps. Sorry.
Yeah.
And so they turn on the TV till the John comes, and they're just watching. So when they see that number, it's a great source for them. And then they're the ones calling in so they can give details to the hotline.
Just gives me chills.
Yeah. And then on the other end, what can everyday people do to help?
Well, every day,
I think just talking about it and keeping your eyes out, right?
Keeping your eyes out, educating people, getting churches and synagogues to talk about it. Any place where people are in groups, they should talk about it. Many companies now are starting to give food or programs also to some of the shelters and some of the groups, and that is very helpful.
Yeah.
Or job opportunities to survivors, which also is very, very helpful. They need job training and they need
definitely
jobs.
Yeah, and a lot of them they have work experience. They've been working. They just need an opportunity.
Right.
So yes, let's talk a little bit about Ford. Was it crazy living with other with models? You weren't modeling at the.
I never.
Never modeled. Did you ever feel the pressure to?
No.
Because your mom did.
Yeah.
Oh, she briefly did in college. My mother was definitely a fashion person. She loved fashion. After college, she wrote for fashion magazines and she wrote copy for stores. I am relatively shy. Didn't have the looks to be a model. Didn't have the desire to be a model. Was it crazy living with models? No. They were like our sisters.
Yeah.
Well, I say when I was little, they were like our mothers. Then they were like, as I got older, like our sisters.
Yeah.
And then they were like my children.
Yeah.
Depending on my age.
Yeah. Right.
And it was really fun. I always wondered why everybody else's houses were so quiet. I never couldn't figure out.
You're like, how come Christy Turlington isn't sneaking out of everybody's house?
So how come, yes, it was how come it was teenagers. So they were fun to be with when we were young. And we really didn't know any differently. We knew that there weren't models in other people's homes, but it was no different than, this is for modeling. This is what you need as a lawyer. This is what you need as a doctor.
Yeah.
So
your
for us,
parents
it was just normal.
Yeah.
And they did everything we did. So if we had to weed the garden on the weekend, they had to weed the garden.
Yeah.
Or wash the dishes, whatever it was.
Yeah. But you never felt the pressure to like be stunning? Because I feel even us growing up with a dermatologist dad, we notice, little flaws and things. And I'm like, oh, if he's got patients that look so good, like we should look so good.
I knew I was never going to look like a model. It was not a question of whether I was going to look like a model. So
yeah, I guess.
And it wasn't. My parents never said you're not going to be a model or look like it. I never wanted it, but it just wasn't something that I thought I had to be. I thought you had to be a certain way to be a model, just like you had to have a degree to be a lawyer.
Exactly. So it wasn't like all women need to be stunning. Like they were like, Katie, your brain is just as important.
We didn't even have to discuss it.
Okay.
That was not a discussion.
Yeah.
It was a given that different people did different things.
Yeah. Cool.
That's great. I guess because even just growing up today, and obviously beauty standards have changed a lot from when your parents started Ford, but
I mean, don't you
there's
remember
a lot of
Mom
pressure.
saying that she used to feel really ugly as a child, and then Twiggy came out as a model, and Twiggy was finally this like little waifishly thin thing, just like my mom, and she's like, and I finally felt like I fit in, and then she's telling that to me and Charlotte, who've got boobs and butts, and we're like, shut up! Like that's what they
so
want
hard
now.
Being chicken legs.
Yeah, it was
like,
so hard being so thin.
Life is a bitch.
Yeah.
But I guess just as a person, not even just a woman, there's so much pressure to feel a certain way and look a certain way.
Yeah.
And I can't even imagine being surrounded by the epitome of beauty.
Well, I think there was always a pressure with certain people to be and look a certain way. I don't think that started with our generation, your generation. I think that it is part of mankind.
Yeah. And it's actually interesting now that I'm thinking about Twiggy, like Mom's body then probably wouldn't be so in right now with the Kylie Jenner butts being in fashion. So like I used to think when she said to me, I was like, oh, well, good. Now like your body's in style now. But it shouldn't be about your body being in style. It's about embracing your body at whatever time and whatever is in style, because that's
we
you.
don't have a choice about this.
Yeah,
totally.
We can keep healthy and tone if you want to be, but we are born with a certain body.
A bulldog, no matter how much he diets, will never be a
look like a Great
greyhound.
Dane. Doesn't matter. It's built differently.
The bulldog just has to be like, I like my little haunches, and
that's
somebody else will
exactly
too.
it.
Yeah.
And, when I was young, that's how I thought. I thought somebody is going to like me for me, just like they like someone else for them.
Yeah.
It wasn't me versus modeling. It was just in general.
Me versus me.
Me and me.
Yeah.
And when I go out with someone, I'm going to have to, the person who likes me has to like me for who I am.
Totally. Did you always like you?
Oh, I didn't. Well, I didn't. Some people are very self-loathing. I was mortified sometimes with embarrassment if I did the wrong thing or I said the wrong thing. I still can.
That's a very relatable thing.
Yes. Stay up at night and think of that weird thing you said 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Or 30.
Yeah.
Or why your French teacher didn't give you the grade you deserve.
We were literally just saying that. I was like, I'll never forget that place in Jordan because I got that wrong on a test.
Yep. Literally.
So, yes, that probably is still part of me when I get things wrong. I remember when I first was speaking in fighting trafficking, I was so nervous, and I gave the worst talk. The worst.
Yeah.
And I apologized to the hostess, and I said, I am going to get much better by the next time I speak because I was so nervous.
Yeah.
And now I know what I'm talking about, but this was a while ago.
Definitely. Yeah, but it's like one of those moments that you're like, I never want to do this again. It's like, no, just do it better next time.
Yes, I didn't have the reaction that I didn't want to do.
Yeah.
But I usually had the reaction. I really had to practice a lot.
Yeah, because it's an important cause too. And you're like, I want to give the gravity of the situation what it deserves.
Yes, and I want people to be convinced to help.
Mm-hmm. Totally. Did you had so many women around. Were you guys having sex talks and stuff?
With models, yes.
Yes.
Yeah. That's the end of that discussion.
Yeah. Okay.
I loved how your mom would scold photographers who asked the models out.
Yes.
And say, like, if you ever want to work with a Ford model again, you don't do that.
Yes. That is so different to anything because you always just think, oh, yeah, the models are for photographers, date them.
They're lucky to be here.
They're lucky to be here. Yeah.
Well, I want to tell you a flip side of that.
Mm-hmm.
My mother chastised an American photographer for going out with a German model. And I think he was an assistant photographer at that time. And she called and she chewed him out. He told this story when my father died at the funeral, the photographer. They had been married for over 30 years and had 4 or 5 kids and tons of grandchildren. But he told this story. So sometimes they got married.
Yeah.
Yes, and they were both young. It wasn't abusive. They just liked each other, and they were both new in New York.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It wasn't, you owe me this.
Sure.
For doing that.
Definitely,
which we have heard about, especially in the last few years. But that certainly did exist before also. Mm-hmm. And it's why my mother was so adamant, saying this is a business. This is not your playpen.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I mean, and even if she was to give him that talk, he's like, well, it's kind of that talk of like, what are your intentions? And he's like, my intentions are good.
Yeah.
I want to marry her and give her grandchildren.
Well, I doubt he would have said that at that time. How many?
He's like, I'm 17.
Yes, they were in there like 21. Yeah. So it's retrospect that he could tell that story.
Yeah.
But, that did happen also. So, but there has also been abuse,
totally,
as there is in every field. Mm-hmm. We've learned.
Yeah. And so she would go in and she'd say, if you're going to creep on these girls, you're not going to work with Ford. And that, I think, really changed their professionalism.
It did. It changed a lot. And I have to say that I think people were less likely to fool around with Ford models and try things because my mother was so outspoken. Mm-hmm. Of course, we all were outspoken. My father also backed that up. Mm-hmm. Not that she needed his backup. My father was the calm and my mother was the storm. And they balanced each other out perfectly.
That's so nice. That's a great example to see too.
It is. It is amazing to see how long
a partnership in marriage and in business.
And in business. That is very hard. And let me tell you, my mom was a tough cookie. Mm-hmm. It would have been difficult, but they learned how to separate what they each did and who said what. Mm-hmm. I didn't have the same luck with my mother. When somebody wanted to, when we were selling the company, and I said, Mom, please don't say that thing you said at the last meeting.
Yeah.
Like, who wants all this crummy stock?
Yeah.
What did she do?
She said it.
She said it again.
I'm like, Mom!
After that, I decided she wouldn't be at any of the meetings. She had no understanding, really, of what stock meant.
Okay.
She thought that even if we sold the stock, the business would still be hers and the same.
But it wouldn't.
Yeah.
Was that tough giving it up? After your whole family started it, you grew up in it, you were CEO for such a long time.
It was not tough to give up. I wanted to actually do something I still haven't done, but I had always been passionate about Indigenous groups, and I wanted to work with Indigenous groups.
Yeah.
And I was turning 50, and I thought, if I'm going to travel to all these faraway places to help them, I better start doing it soon.
Yeah.
You know, you don't start that necessarily in your 70s.
Mm-hmm.
You can, but I didn't want to. So for me, it was something I was determined to do.
Mm-hmm.
Also, all our family assets were in one business. So if it didn't do well, we didn't do well.
Sure.
So I really thought it was
time to diversify.
Diversify. And 2 weeks after my last day at Ford, I went to the conference on human trafficking.
Mm-hmm.
And I came back and I said to the person who I had hired to work with me on the Indigenous Group Project, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that. If you would like to help me fight trafficking.
Mm-hmm. This is my cause.
I was overcome when I heard this,
yeah.
that people are still in slavery.
Yeah.
And my whole life I'd said to myself, how can people stand by when they know people are enslaved?
Mm-hmm.
I asked myself that about the 1800s.
Yeah.
So I came back, and that's what I've done ever since.
It's amazing.
It's also such, like, that timing is serendipity.
It
like
was
2 weeks later.
Yeah.
You're so right. If I had gone to that conference and I was still CEO of Ford and not going to sell it, I would never have had the time to learn. I spent 1 year just studying it because it's criminal. Mm-hmm. So you have to make sure when you're helping people, you're not endangering them. And that is a big risk.
Right.
So I really wanted to make sure I had met different groups and knew who to work with.
Is that what happens a lot of times is when people are saved, it makes it worse? Or people try to attempt to save people, it makes it worse for them?
You know, I don't know that is the case because I haven't heard that many times when people are trying to save someone when they don't already have the skill set.
Right. All right.
That makes sense.
2 more things.
Ask
whatever you want.
No, it does seem very, not all or nothing, but either, like, you know, you don't know much about the issue or you're very well versed in it and get the tools to help so that you can do it well. I don't think anybody's really half-assing human trafficking.
That's right. I don't think many people are. You know, I wanted to mention one more thing that people can do. Whether it's companies or individuals, there's something called the responsible sourcing tool for looking at supply chains and where companies are at risk of having trafficking in their supply chains. If there are people in companies who don't know about it and
who was
don't.
that had a bunch of child? It was one of the QVC women, I think, didn't realize that
that was child
labor. Right? Yeah. And they got called out for it, and she's like, I had no idea. And of course I'm going to shut this down. I don't remember who it was. I'll have to look it up.
Right. Thank you.
Yes.
It was a long time ago. I wasn't involved in fighting trafficking, so I don't know if it was child labor.
I think it was child labor.
Where people...
Let me look it up.
I'm pretty sure it was child
labor. So it's
labor.
really like do your due diligence. Make sure you know about...
Where you're sourcing. But and most companies know today about it. They have somebody who supposedly is in charge, but they don't do the work to find it because they don't want to find it.
Yeah.
You know, and there's a group called Verite. And if you go to verite.org, for me, they are the best at explaining to companies how to check whether there's trafficking and what their policies should look like.
Yeah. And what to do, I guess, if they do find out that it's happening. Yeah, I can't imagine discovering that in your own company.
Well, I think most companies know today that manufacture things. Mm-hmm. I think most of them know it's a high risk that there is trafficking in their supply chain, somewhere in their supply chain.
And some companies don't really care because it costs.
They don't want to find it because then you have to have a policy against it, which you should anyway. Mm-hmm. What to do, how to take care of it. Mm-hmm. They don't want to manufacture with. They want to manufacture with the lowest cost producer, and they may compete with foreign companies that are not doing the same thing. Or domestic companies, frankly.
Kathy Lee Gifford.
Kathy Lee Gifford. Yes, she's the one who had
so many Kathys.
Yeah, it was like, was it Melanie Griffith or Kathy Lee Gifford? You guys all need different names.
Yeah. Back in 96.
Back in 96, yeah, she was. Who was the first one who broke? Look at you. You're so good at research.
Well, my New York Times is not letting me read any more articles for free.
Well, yeah, apparently they were calling her like the sweatshop queen and stuff, and she's like, I have no idea. But
this is incredible because she had no idea, and then now you have these articles that are not just like, she's doing this horrible thing. It's Kathy Lee and the sweatshop crusade. Like, she absolutely took it, changed not just changed the narrative, like changed it. Everything
cause
she was doing and made the cause well known.
I think most people, when they find out about it, are like, let's shut this the fuck down. They're not like, this is cool.
Well, I think in her case, it hurt her so much.
Definitely.
That the company shut down.
Yeah.
I believe. And, maybe she was horrified.
Yeah.
And so she wanted to shut it down. Not all companies react that way.
No.
Yeah. A lot of want to sweep it under the rug or, keep it quiet. And it says like in the LA Times that she became the poster girl for sweatshops, but in a positive way.
For fighting child labor, which is a wonderful thing for her to do.
Yeah.
And a good way to use the press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you have used all of your resources in such a really cool, very important way. And we're very, very honored to have you here and have you speak to our audience.
It's honestly like astounding, really, what you've done.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
We're very, very...
Thank you. It's very rewarding,
Good.
and it's rewarding working with all of my partners who are on the ground and watching the children and the adults who come, I say, back to life when they are just restored and their families are flourishing and they're flourishing.
Yeah. I think that's a great note to end it on. We have to ask this to all of our guests to be courteous hosts. Katie Ford, did you finish?
Yes.
Thank you so much. Can you tell everybody where they can find you and your work online and everything else?
Yes, you can find my not-for-profit Freedom for All at freedomforall.org.
Perfect.
And if you have any questions or would like to help, write us on our info account.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And we'll see you next time on How Come?
Bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.
It's not you, it's me. I try so hard to finish honestly. They say you'll know when you go all the way from A right down to O. Oh no, I think that I still got a ways to go. Oh, I'm sick of this and I have got to know. How come? How come? How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help. 'Cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna just